Welcome to Dig Deep with Dr. Yolie, where we explore the questions, stories, and experiences that shape who we are and who we are becoming. I'm Dr. Yolanda Sealey-Ruiz. Let's dig in. I am so excited to be back again. Now, usually, I start with reading a poem for Dig Deep with Dr. Yolie. I want to read a little bit from chapter 9 because today's amazing, beautiful, brilliant guest, my gosh, Amy Elizabeth Fox. I shared that chapter with her before I knew we were going to be together, as I've been reading from her book, Leading in Chaos. Archaeology of Self is a revolutionary gesture of love towards oneself, towards our students, and towards the communities we serve. The excavation is purposeful, uncovering our experiences, our biases, our wounds, and then, in addition to this, our possibility of healing. We dig deep to confront these layers and to understand how race has shaped us in our decisions in the classroom and beyond. It requires our honesty about what we bring into our teaching and leadership spaces, our assumptions, our fears, our failures, because love without self-excavation is merely performative. It becomes theory without action. So ask yourself, what does my love in action look like? And Amy Elizabeth Fox is love in action. She is the co-founder and CEO of Mobius Executive Leadership, a global transformational leadership firm. For over 20 years, she has advised senior leaders in eminent professional services, firms, Fortune 500 companies on leadership and cultural change. In 2026, and this is what I've been sitting with, in 2026, she co-authored Leading in Chaos with Nicholas Johnny and is widely regarded as an expert in vertical development and trauma-informed work in organizations. I want to say a little bit about the book because this particular podcast episode will be different. How beautiful it is that Archaeology of Self is in the world, Leading in Chaos is in the world, and Amy and I are together. This beautiful book, Nicholas Johnny and Amy Elizabeth Fox, they've offered a gift. Leading in Chaos argues that in an era of polycrisis, and I think you'll agree that this is where we are, in an era of polycrisis and sustained uncertainty, leadership requires a next practice, a fundamentally different inner operating system grounded in deeper human intelligence. It reframes leadership as an embodiment, developmental practice, calling leaders to act with coherence, with presence, and integrity amid ongoing disruption. Because, in their words, chaos is the new black. All right, Amy, listen, I'm putting on my seatbelt. I'm strapping myself in because, Amy, every time I'm in your presence, and I mean this, I feel like I am challenged towards my higher self. That you make me feel that leadership was meant for me. Although I am someone who wants to I think I'm a distributive leader. I think I'm someone that I want everyone to be happy. Let's all lead together. When I'm in your presence, I understand the power of that, but I also understand the power of not being afraid to step out and lead with love and to pull others along if they're not there. Anyway, I'm going to stop there and have you open, Amy, before we get into conversation. What is on your mind, Amy?
Well, first of all, the great joy of being back with you. And I really do think that celebrating that these two works, while different in content, are deeply aligned in their mission and invitation, I think. And I think it's useful for us to be joining forces because you're doing your exquisite work in the world of education. I happen to be doing it right now in the world of business leaders and public sector leaders who shape cultural architecture. But I think both books, much like what you just shared with us, are calling people to a deep presencing of themselves to themselves, in a sense. Um, we're both trying to crack a layer of denial and numbing and looking away to call people to the urgent need for inner healing and inner self contact and self blessing that makes it possible to be a participant in the re-democratization of the world or the re-liberation of the world. And I have felt this time to be an escalating time of cruelty and uncertainty, sort of exactly as you framed why the books are now urgent. And I think in the face of that cruelty, we gain great hope from committing ourselves to the integrity of our inner life and to being the generation that is committed to a restorative walk. And that's why I think trauma informed, healing centered work is relevant for every leader. And frankly, it's relevant for anybody who wants to come home to themselves and lay to rest the burdens of their ancestors, which I think is uniquely available to our generation.
I just want to start off so many things that you said, self blessing. I want to get to the book, but I first want to ask about you.
Mm,
How did you become Amy Elizabeth Scott as you understand yourself
mm,
now?
mm.
You can just say a little bit about that. And also, if you wouldn't mind sharing like a moment early in your career when you first realized the importance of addressing trauma and fear in leadership. You could take that on for us. That would be amazing.
Both beautiful questions, so I'll take them one at a time. Of course, we never know exactly how we became who we became, but there are some central facts in my biography that I think have a lot to do with shaping how I understood what my contribution was meant to be. The first is that I had academic liberal civil rights parents who were very involved in the integration of New York City school systems and teacher education and cared deeply about exactly what you've devoted your life to, the quality of public education as a resource for citizenry and healing. So that was inculcated into my thinking very early on, and I had the privilege to work at the School of Education at City College of New York early in my career as a sort of a bow to what my parents had devoted their life to, and that was certainly formative. But I spent 10 years at the Cathedral Church of St. John the Divine in New York in the late 80s and early 90s. And at that time, it was a hotbed of advocacy, consciousness, liturgy, expressive arts. It was like a cosmic mischief making entity. And I had the privilege, enormous privilege, of apprenticing with the dean of the cathedral and Paul Gorman, who was its public affairs advocate, and Carl Sagan and Al Gore as they attempted to jumpstart and catalyze a religious response to the environmental crisis and the environmental justice crisis. So in my early 20s, I got to see what leadership really looks like and how you can bring people into coalition around higher principles across great division and across great divergence of views on behalf of a common cause, on behalf of, the cause of creation or equity or justice. And it really refined my sense, exactly as you said, that it's a consciousness leap that we need to make. It's not an economic argument. It's not a political argument. It's not even a social movement. It's helping people to look through the eyes of love and unity, which then reveal what is out of alignment for attending and seed hopes for what could be born. And I think the work of our time is vertical in both directions. We have to do the shadow work, we have to do the racial healing work, we have to do the restorative work, the family healing work for our ancestors. And at the same time, we're being asked to or invited to reach for celestial dust to create a field of grace, a field of inclusion, and a profound field of belonging.
So much of what you say for me is so poetic. It is deeply profound and also poetic. And I just wanted to acknowledge that in your responses and just in looking at your face and seeing the deep sincerity and love that you have for others. I can only imagine what it is like for these leaders to work with you. And I do want to ask a question. I want to read a little bit, if you don't mind, from the book. We were sharing a little bit before we began that when I received the book, I just opened it up. And that's always a message for me. When I crack open a book, where do I land?
I love it.
And lo and behold, I landed on one of your chapters on spiritual intelligence. And that was enough for me right there. So I want to read this small piece and then I want to ask the next question.
Great.
A lot is being written about the transformational capacities that will be required, talking about leadership in these times. Psychological safety, intuition, collective intelligence, inclusion, sense making, etc. All of that is true and meaningfully so. The deeper call, however, is a spiritual one. That stopped me in my tracks. And as you know, Amy, in chapter 9, I talk about archaeologists of the self. In your leadership, specifically the programs that you engage CEOs, C-suite folks with, how do you encourage these executives to excavate their own stories and their own biases, specifically in preparation for the spiritual journey that is embedded, what you're suggesting in leadership? That has to be there.
Yeah.
How do you prepare them for this?
First of all, I would say, and I'd be curious if you agree with this or nuance it, the psychological healing journey is not separate from the spiritual journey, because the thing that keeps us from open-hearted experiences of awe and wonder and generosity and compassion and service are the numbness that unhealed trauma has caused. So if we want to unlock an executive's natural waterfall of caring and tenderness and aligned action, we have to go back for what the block to that is, which is almost always a hurt heart that got locked up early in childhood and has walked with them for a long time. So one part of how I prepare people is I start, as you do in your courses, being very explicit and candid and confrontationally so about the degree to which we are walking around in a regressive, hurt state and making decisions and shaping culture from a 5-year-old's perspective. And that has enormous implications for how the world conducts itself. And then I ask them, I sort of build out a metaphor of emotional development, and I describe all of these natural emotions that are hardwired into all of us: joy, love, hurt, grief, fear, anger. But none of that's permissible in the workplace. So we are asked to put a wall in front of all that, and we make that wall in micro hacks of emotion to numb ourselves and cut ourselves off from feeling, all the way to large addictions that become compulsions of running. And then I ask the leaders, what's the business cost and the emotional cost of the wall? And the group will inevitably say incredibly poignant things like, I'm totally alone. I don't know who I could ask for help. I'm making my decisions quickly and in a knee-jerk reaction because I'm afraid of stopping and feeling the implications of what I'm doing. Many things that are not just poignant, but powerful dilemmas of modern life. And they make the business case in that dialogue about why it would be important for a leader to expand their self-contact and to, most importantly, expand what they can host in the people around them. Because if they're not a refuge for people to bring their fears and for people to bring their fondest hopes and greatest gifts, how are they actually going to elevate people's possibilities? You can't. So if you're a no to your own emotional and familial experience, you're a no to everybody else's most vulnerable parts. And in much the same way that you're calling teachers to do the self as instrument work first and foremost, so that they can create a climate in the classroom where people can have candid and robust dialogue, you have to be first grounded in yourself and capable of that interior examination before you can host and conduct it elsewhere. You mentioned poetry, and I just wanted to come back to that. I think it's important to say that part of the terrain of the work we're both calling for is painful and hard. Liberatory work asks you to look in the rooms of your house that you closed for a good reason, because at the time they were overwhelming. So I just want to name that when you're talking about trauma healing or we're talking about bias examination, we're asking people to step over the pandemic of superficiality and create real community where those conversations are safe to open up and they can be held with a sensitivity to everybody's needs and rawness, I would say.
And poetry, as we know, and different art forms allow for that. They
Yes.
really are as like a magical portal that you can
Yeah.
say things. I often think that way about humor too. I look at satires,
Yeah.
satires,
Satires.
yeah.
Yeah.
I look at comedians that say things, Amy, that we don't dare to say in our everyday conversations. And they engage us, with this laughter, but also at the same time saying, wow, there's such deep truth to that. And so engaging these various emotions around very serious and deep and vulnerable topics is what I find art beautifully does.
A huge affirmation of what you're saying about the artistic or aesthetic or poetics inside healing programs. I know you do that in your retreats. I do it in every one of my retreats as well, partly because it's a way to say things that are hard to say in a different modality or a different mode of expression, but
Right.
also because the opposite of aesthetic is anesthetic. In a
Mm,
sleeping society where everybody is cut off from their creativity and joy and self expression, to weave that back into the workplace is to welcome people in their full capacities and intelligences. So it brings back online an embodied imagination and a catalytic intuition that you can't get any other way.
my goodness. First, I want to say that I spent 14 years in corporate America. And that's where I cut my teeth on what it means to be a working adult, right? I started actually when I was in high school, part of what they called a co op program, where I went to school one week and then I worked, right? And I did that for my junior and senior year. It was such a shock into the world of business. And then after college, I ended up working for the New York Times. I worked for Business Week. And believe it or not, in the year, whatever, 2007, I was the first Black marketing director for one of NYU's schools. I'm saying all that to say, if I had engaged or was part of a program of what you offer CEOs or companies, maybe I would have stayed in corporate America. I don't know, or maybe my calling was teaching, but at one point I was doing both. There was such a vacancy of humanity in those companies for me. It was very, very traumatic. And
Yeah.
at the same time, I call it my boot camp because, in many ways, I feel like what I learned in corporate America in terms of ridiculous deadlines, this
Mhm.
urgency that we're constantly pushing up against, it helped me to see the academy in a different kind of way. So I'm saying all that to ask you this question. Can you share a specific story where an organization experienced real change by integrating your healing centered approach? And what challenges did they overcome? And as you do that, I'm going to go back in my mind and dream myself at the New York Times again and listening to if our leadership had taken up some of the things that you did. Could we have had different experiences and relationships with each other? It was very volatile.
Yes, I'd be happy to share an example, but I first want to affirm your experience, which is most organizational cultures are built on a mechanical view of the workforce. So they are anti-embodied in that they're pushing people to mental and physical levels of exhaustion and asking people to operate at an abnormal and dangerous speed of exertion and processing. They're anti-emotion in that people are supposed to check their feelings at the door, and we have this totally false bifurcation between personal and professional. I'm supposed to work next to somebody for 20 years and not know that they have an autistic child. It's absurd. And they're anti-relation in a very important way. The coin of the realm is what they call resilience or autonomy, which means I don't need you. It's antithetical to life. We need each other. We operate in villages. So I'm constantly trying to teach leaders how to reweave the art of relation, of making relational offers and making relational requests, to have a vocabulary of emotional support, not just problem solving and collaborative analytics. So all of that spirit is missing from almost all workplaces. When a group of leaders at a top team level, or people who are very high potential, or people who are in charge of large change transformations, commit to doing this deep healing work together, it's like you're sending immune cells into the culture of that organization to start operating in new ways. And if you reach a certain tipping point or saturation, then those immune cells won't get attacked. They'll start to get absorbed, and they'll start to role model and create something else. But as you might imagine, because most organizations operate quite hierarchically, when you have a visionary CEO who says this transformational capability process is critical to our being able to lead in the future, we have to get future ready by cultivating inner skills for adaptation, for groundedness, for co regulation, for exponential imagination, for befriending the mystery, since we're moving into a world that is so unknowable, really spiritual surrender at some level. When you have a leader who's willing to go on their own journey of excavation and deep transformation, then that trickles out very quickly to become cultural pillars. I'll share just one story, but thankfully I have many over the last 20 years. I sometimes worry that when people listen to the depth of trauma healing work I'm doing, they're going to assume that it's on the margins of corporate life or organizational life. And to some degree, it is still ahead of its time. Both of our work does not really represent the mainstream. But on the other hand, we're not so far ahead that we don't have examples of places where it's already flourishing and beautifully. There was an iron ore company that I had the privilege of working with that brought us in because they had violated sacred sites of Indigenous people in New Zealand. And they wanted to use the occasion of having done something that was so antithetical to right alignment to really look. And they did an extraordinary work where they went into all of the mines and asked people to share stories. This is a public story, which is why I can tell it, to share stories of how they had been harassed, of where there had been racial or gender violence, of where there had been violent acts of sexual violation. And they gathered all of those stories and created places, for really safe places for people to share what had been their experience as part of a restorative wave to help people to become aware of and vigorously committed to what it would be to really create a safe workplace. And in tandem, they had us do trauma for the secondhand trauma that the human resource people got from conducting these interviews and receiving these stories, which are, as you can imagine, very, very painful stories. And they took thousands of people through a transformational leadership program to shift the way that they worked together and collaborated. And uh, it took about 5 years, that project, and it was beautiful. And it's one of several settings in which there's been a business crisis or a business opportunity. In one case, it was the head of an agricultural company who wanted to collaborate on food regeneration across competitors, and he was getting resistance from his top team to work with people that they had been adversaries for a long time. And he was trying to raise their consciousness that this went beyond profits. This was about food security. And then we were able to do that. And then they undertook a really fascinating and ongoing cross-boundary collaboration among numerous companies that were playing in that domain. So I do believe that the false link between values and open-heartedness and corporate behavior and ethical choices and business strategy are going to come to blend with one another as this movement takes hold. I guess the last thing I would say is that I wrote a sentence I really loved last week. I had a program with 24 leaders that was super touching, and where people really did the depth of work that I aspire to, and it moved me greatly. And I wrote this line on LinkedIn. I wrote, "The future of work is love."
It is, Amy. The future of humanity is love.
Exactly.
The any future that we're going to have that we will thrive
Yeah.
must be rooted in love.
Yes.
Amy, that is, I'm just so grateful for this conversation. I just want to say that, and I want
Thank you.
publicly, and I want to say that when you were sharing those stories, particularly the first one about the mines, my eyes started twitching and I felt like chills in my hands. And I'm so grateful for those somatic reactions because it's just, reminding me that I'm alive to other people's experiences and their trauma, but also their healing. I haven't gotten so far in the book yet, but will some of those stories be in Leading in Chaos? I wonder, as if you were to say what the reader could look forward to as they were
Yes.
reading the book. Could you say a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, the book is written out of Nicholas and my 20-year experience doing trauma healing and coaching with top teams and in lots of settings. And they're small chapters, so they're like little provocations. You're not meant to read it end to end. You're meant to engage it as something comes up for you by theme and to get the medicine that you most need. There absolutely are stories of our client work. They're visions of our hope for humanity. They're descriptions of what we think the vital work of this time is. What we refrained from doing is to move to action because we think the bias towards action is part of the way the business world stops from doing its deeper investigation of its choices. So I'm happy to share practices, but the book really keeps the discourse at the level of what's profoundly needed to be talked about, and it's an invitation to dialogue. We hope for many people to share with us their healing story. As you so generously asked me, how did you come to this work? What resources do we all need? What are we finding works? How do you translate this healing movement in different contexts? The book is meant to be a portal to generationally critical conversation, I would say.
Amy, thank you, thank you, thank you. I have one more question before we get to what we call rapid reflection. And I just want to share that some of those rapid reflections, particularly with Dr. Angela Costa, became moments of pause before he answered. So, absolutely no pressure. We are not here to do urgency at all. And all that you have done and continue to do, right, with Nicholas, alone with other partners over these decades. Would just love to hear from you as you look ahead in doing this work. What hope do you have for leaders and organizations that commit to this type of healing centered approach to racial literacy and to organizational change?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me bow to our mutual brother, Angel Acosta, whose pioneering work inspires both of us and is deeply woven into our dialogue together, of course. I also want to nod to my sister, Erica R.L. Fox, with whom I founded Mobius and who is also herself a pioneering shadow worker and healer. I would say two things give me hope. One is that my experience is that people that others might think would be resistant to this kind of work, operate in a very Cartesian engineering mindset analytically, don't have any desire to be engaging in self-reflection. Those are the very people who come into my programs Sunday night, cold, formal, a little bit aloof. And by Thursday evening, so 4 days, if you get it right, which we have learned to do, and craft a container where deep work is invited and welcomed and sort of systematically titrated to be the level of the group development, by Thursday night, they are crying together. They are dancing together. They are reading poems, as you said, that they've written that afternoon for the first time in 20 years. They are hugging each other. They are celebrating life, and they're full of hope. 4 days to go from frozen to generous mutuality. That's very little time.
Mm.
I hope week after week after week, thousands of leaders I have watched go through that process. And what gives me courage on Sunday night is that I know who they're going to be on Thursday night. So I don't take seriously defenses. I'm speaking to the soul that's been waiting for a refuge place for a long time. And that really does give me a great deal of hope. I think the other thing I would say is I just really feel this is the call of our times. And I feel grateful to have allies and friends like you that are in the journey and doing the work on the front lines. I think we're all experimenting. I don't think any of us have the ultimate answer, but I think we have principles or tenets of what the work is and what it asks of us and what it offers that give me a lot of fuel to keep going anyway.
Before I get to rapid reflection, Amy, I just want to respond to that by reading something from Leading in Chaos.
Mm.
You say, The ability to remain calm amid chaos comes only from a deep grounding in source. This sense of connection, in turn, helps us to hold an abiding faith in the ultimate goodness of all things. And I respond with what you just said because from Sunday to Thursday, it's like you go in knowing that there is this goodness of the human spirit, that it does exist, and that your work in and of itself is hope, is vision for what is possible. And in some ways, what is already there just needs to be excavated.
Just to build on what you're saying, anything that appears as other than beautiful is untreated trauma. And if you have that lens, then any way that somebody shows up that's contorted or contracted or divisive or resistant, you just realize that's early hurt in action. And you bring to that the way you would treat a child that was hurt. You cradle that. You don't attack that. You might confront it. You might have to name it. You might have to call their attention to it. But you know in your heart that it's hurt. And I also wanted to add, you talked about your goosebumps. My teacher, Thomas Hubel, says there are certain kinds of tears that you cry when you're in the presence of watching the divine in action. They're called tears for God. And that's how I feel every time I'm in the holy presence of a healing, that it's beyond human kindness and skill. It's life wanting to repair itself. It's the self-healing mechanism of life itself that I do believe we can rest in.
Thank you. And this is the hope for people to tap into that, to untether from racism, sexism, homophobia, all the isms and phobias that actually cause the chasm
Yes.
for us to be human with one another. And we see exactly where that has led us, which is, thank you for this book. Thank you for also seeing, as I see, how it complements, intersects, speaks to archaeology of self and what I am hoping to do, certainly first in the world of education, but in the world in general.
I just want to be very specific about that, Yolie. Your book has deep principles of healing, but it has specific medicine of how we address the trauma of racism. And for all of us who care about the future of humanity, that work is so utterly critical. And in that sense, it's a hugely additive to the technology and leading in chaos, because if we continue to do violence to one another in that way, everything else will be hollow.
Thank you for that affirmation, for that love. Thank you for seeing my work, Amy. I was very, very particular with the folks that I invited to say something. And thank you for taking the time and the beautiful endorsement. Thank you. Thank you. Are we ready for some rapid reflection?
Rapid fire away, sister. Yes.
Here we go. In one word, Amy, what does the word healing mean to you in the leadership context?
Melting into love.
Oof. Name a fear or stressor you check in with in your body at the start of the workday.
Oh my gosh, so many. I guess I have an anxiety about being abandoned in the discourse, like feeling too lonely.
Mm, mm, mm. Finish this sentence, Amy. A healed leader, we know healing is a journey too. A healed leader is one who
has begun the journey of reconciling their past and their ancestral legacy, and has unlocked their own deep reverence for life to see how they're meant to serve.
What is one practice, even just for 1 minute, you do to ground yourself in a moment of crisis?
Pray.
Amen to that. What's one myth, Amy, about leadership that you've let go of as you started to do this healing work?
Oh, the myth that any one person can get it right all the time. My trauma shows up as grouchiness and control and bossiness and blind spots. And for 20 years, it's been actively in my attention, the gap between what I aspire to do and what my body is healed enough to do. And I think leadership is a humble journey of constantly being faced with your gaps of healing and the opportunity to move into greater wholeness.
My gosh, beautifully said. What's
Mm.
something you've learned about team resilience when you focus on people's humanity first?
Teams that build a deeper level of trust and solidarity can get to the moon.
Need to breathe after that one, Amy.
Mm.
Give me a second.
Mm.
Okay, I have two more for you.
Wonderful, they're juicy.
Name one sign that your team is feeling psychologically safe and open.
Somebody discloses on the team what's really going on in their shakiest interiority as a request for emotional support and care.
Facing the fear and doing it anyway.
Absolutely. And not facing the fear alone. A healthy team is a sanctuary where everybody can bring their fear.
Mm. And the last one for now, I have this feeling, Amy, that our conversations will continue. I welcome it. I feel blessed to know you. I thank God every day that Angel, number one, came into my life and the people that he's brought into my life. And you are one of those people. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And last but not least, what hope or call to action would you share with listeners ready to do this work? They've just engaged, they've listened to us. What's a call that you have for them to consider, Amy, to come into this work?
I would say two things. I think during this time of chaos, acts of self-care are acts of rebellion.
Yes.
So my first call to action would be do an impeccable, rigorous inventory of if you're putting the oxygen mask on yourself enough, because any one of us is in danger of burning out in the context in which we're trying to serve and give. So that would be my first call to action. And my second call to action would be just look around in the context in which your life is unfolding and see who needs you.
Listeners and viewers, Amy Elizabeth Fox, leading in chaos and loving in real time. Amy, thank you for this time.
Thank you, Yolie. It's a joy, really.
What a joy this has been for me. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me on Dig Deep with Dr. Yolie. Until next time, stay curious, be gentle with yourself, and keep digging deep.